Hello everybody, welcome to 2CTV with some breaking news from Syria and the civil war situation in the country. As over the last few hours we've been getting a lot of updates about the developments caused by the different factions of the rebels, and also in terms of what's been going on over the last few minutes, as Damascus has now been, the capital of Syria is being targeted by different groups of rebels. We still have the different factions. I'm going to go through them again in case you are not familiar. There is so much going on, and we're going to have to go through everything that you might have missed over the last few hours. First things first, the HTS, or the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which are the Islamist groups that used to be linked to Al-Qaeda. They are essentially backed by Turkey, and they are going around massacring the Kurds, as well as, of course, the Bashar al-Assad's forces. They have taken control of Aleppo. The Russians withdrawn their forces initially. The Bashar al-Assad forces also withdrew from Aleppo. Over 50 towns, actually about 60 towns, have now collapsed, fallen, and Homan and other big cities have also collapsed. We have the different factions getting involved. Obviously, we've got the Kurds, who are pro-democracy, but we do have the HTS, and we have an element of ISIS still getting involved. They are very much proactive. They are dominating it. But we do have the Free Syrian Army, the actual pro-democracy Syrians, joined by the Christians, who are also at risk. They are fighting back against both Assad and the Islamists. So it's a very, it's a complicated web, which we're going to go through. Let's give you guys the latest update as Damascus is being targeted now. Statues of Assad are now being brought down. Let's quickly go to the videos we have, and then we're going to get your reaction live as well. More updates are coming in throughout the night.
Allahu Akbar! ساعدوا الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
So there are a lot of because everything is moving fast. It's very, very unusual what's going on right now. For the past 10 years or so, Assad has been dealing with different factions, mostly the Islamists and ISIS lot. It's moving very fast. Question it. So there's a lot of theories about this. It's not the usual CIA stories. Question more, go deeper, different layers. Turkey is being mentioned as one of the, in terms of the, as a conspiracy theory, as a scenario to question it. Turkey being behind it because they are backing, essentially, they're backing the HTS group, which is concerning. There are a number of reasons why Turkey would be interested in this, including their own refugee crisis, the migrant crisis with all the Islamists. They want to get rid of them anyway, and that's one issue. We already have had the Western side, backed by CIA, essentially hitting the Islamists, so they are hitting the rebels. Israel are now getting involved. Israel are going to be hitting the rebels. Essentially, to a point, you could say Israel and the West are helping Assad, which is kind of unusual, but it's in their interest to make sure the Islamists don't actually replace Assad. You don't want Assad to stay. He's a tyrant, he's a dictator, but you don't want him to be replaced by Islamists, HTS or ISIS. So it's not as straightforward as, for example, with Saddam and America replacing him to do their own agenda. So that's going on. So question the presence of Turkey, and of course what's going on with Russia, but let's quickly talk about what's going on, because we do have the presence of the Free Syrian Army. These are the pro-democracy Syrians. They are there. They are fighting at the same time, simultaneously, against Assad and the actual Islamists, which is obviously multitasking on a whole different level anyway. Let's go quickly. This is the flag. So you've got various groups getting involved. The Kurds are fighting back. Turkish-backed groups are hitting the Kurds. Damascus has not fallen, for the record. Is falling, whereas it hasn't fallen. It's difficult to even imagine Damascus as a capital to fall suddenly tonight. If it does, again, It's a very weird situation. You have to question. We don't know where Assad's forces are right now. So there was an update that Assad was brought back. We're going to talk about that in a second. Was brought back from Moscow to Damascus a few hours ago. We had the evidence of a plane landing in Damascus, but now they're saying he's not actually there. We're going to talk about that because it's very complicated and weird. The Iranian consulate, part of the Iranian embassy in Aleppo, has now been taken over. This is by the actual Islamist groups. The Kurds have failed to actually obviously get involved to stop them from doing it. Let's have a look.
حديثة هاي؟
نعم جديدة جدا.
Now, considering this was a very, very last-minute situation, the Iranian regime didn't have enough time to completely evacuate everything and destroy all the documents. I don't know what sort of sensitive documents the rebels have managed to get their hands on inside the Iranian consulate, which will be quite interesting to find out. But the Russians are now threatening Turkey, their own ally, by the way. The whole thing is falling apart. Both Russia and Turkey, obviously BRICS supporters. Turkey wants to join BRICS officially, but India doesn't like them. Obviously, Russia is now getting ready to hit the Turkish groups in the north of Syria. We now have the Kurdish groups, the brighter green section, the northeast. They are now moving towards the darker side. The darker green, that's basically the Islamists. That's the HDS backed by Turkey, who are taking control of Aleppo and all the other sides. The Kurds are coming back to hit both Assad and the Islamist terrorists. So it's you have to make careful. If you're a normal person, do not back Assad. But by default, doesn't mean you have to back the Islamists. Do not back the Islamists. They're also absolute nutters. It's completely a bad situation. It's a lose-lose situation. But we can actually see this. So fighting has obviously started in Aleppo between the Turkish-backed Idlib rebels, which is in the green area and the obviously bottom left, and the Kurdish-led SDF forces. These are the Syrian democracy forces and the defense forces going around different neighborhoods in the yellow area. So it's no longer just about Assad's forces. There's also the biggest conspiracy theory. I know the word conspiracy theory is always ridiculed, but we're using it as a literal meaning. Conspiracy theory. We're theorizing what the scenario could be. Question Turkey. Is Turkey behind this? But also, is it Assad? Is it Assad himself? Is this some sort of genius move? Because he has withdrawn his forces very quickly, very easily, with no trouble. Is it him allowing different factions to take control of some areas, to be out there in the open, and then he could come and crush them? We could see, perhaps, if this whole thing ends tomorrow or the next few days, by Assad, easily, it could have been just Assad getting them out to fight against each other and kill them all. Or is it Erdogan making a move in the region? So the international airport in Aleppo has also fallen now. They have been taken... they've been in the control of the rebels. We can also confirm that the Syrian Democratic Forces, these are the Kurds again, have entered several Christian neighborhoods in Aleppo to safeguard the communities from jihadist attacks. They are now advancing towards the Al-Syrian neighborhood. So the Christians are obviously at risk. The Christians are now being supported by the Kurds, the IDF from Israel, and the Western forces. So the priority right now for the normal side is to protect the Christian community, because you have a small group of Christian militias, the Christian rebels, but most of them are just women and children. They're just living in their neighborhoods. They're civilians. So the Kurds, with the IDF, with the Western forces, they are trying to protect the Christian side. Now, Iran also announced that its border, Iraq also announced its border with Syria is now closed. They know what could lead to that, because considering that the Kurds are involved with this whole thing, you got the Kurds in Iraq as well. You don't want Iraq to turn into more chaos than it is. Part of Iraq is already controlled by the IRGC in Iran. They basically occupied Iraq. You still have some of the elements of ISIS in Iraq. Iraq knows. I mean, firstly, Iraq doesn't exist anymore as a real country. They want you to think it's a country. It's not really. It's a failed state. If Pakistan is more of a stable country than Iraq. But they know if Syria falls, Iraq falls, the Hezbollah of Iraq will be in trouble. It would help the opponents of the Iran-backed allies, so Assad, the Iranian regime, all this, but at what cost? Do you want to bring down the Iranian regime and Assad by replacing them with Islamists, the other Islamists, so like the Sunni ISIS-type Islamists? That's the question. There are alternatives. There are pro-democracy Syrians, there are Christians, there are Kurds. You can support them. But can they actually win against Assad and the ISIS-type lot, like HTS? Rebel forces just seen in central Hama, who have basically Hama has also been taken over. The whole city has collapsed. The anti-regime channels are reporting the capture of the city. All of this following the total withdrawal of Syrian and Russian forces. So obviously the Russians have been occupying, with the consent of Assad, Syria. Russian taxpayers' money have been sent to the war in Syria. A lot of the Russian tax money has been spent on the foreign war in Syria. Russian military equipment have been in Syria. They've all withdrawn. Assad withdrew. It seems a little bit weird. Have they actually been surprised and decided to withdraw and then decide what they're going to do in the next few days? Or is there some sort of 4D testing? Again, we can just speculate. We don't know exactly what's going on. But, if this was a movie or a video game, we would say they did it on purpose to get the rebels out, all the factions out in the open, then they're going to go kill them all. But we don't know. The Turkish-backed Idlib rebels, these are the Islamists, the extreme Islamists, have taken, obviously, Hama, Syria's fourth largest city with a population of 1 million. There's still a lot of Christians who live there as well. The Assad regime is collapsing in front of our eyes. Again, it is a little bit weird, considering about 10 years ago, we had the actual civil war, which still went for a while. Assad basically won. But over the last 10 years, there's been a semi-civil war. You had different territories, but Assad was in charge. What is going on? Is he actually losing? This could just be a spontaneous surprise that he's actually losing. It could. Nobody thought in 1979 that the Shah of Iran, the emperor of the Persian Empire, could actually collapse. He did. He lost. The Islamists took over. It could be that he's just losing, but it could also just be that again, apart from the 4D conspiracy theory chess thing that, Russians and the Syrian government with Assad actually planned this to get them in. Is it worth it? I don't know. Turkish groups question Erdogan. The Israelis obviously are supporting, the Israelis are hitting the Islamists. They are also preparing to make a move against the rest of the Islamists. So these are the Islamist rebels against Assad. For the record, Israel does not like Syria, as in Assad. The IDF does not like Assad, but they're technically helping him. Not directly, they're not helping Assad, but they're hitting the Islamist rebels. They would be supporting the other groups, the pro-democracy Syrians, for example. But this was the plane, this was the flight, the RFF 7478. This was the one that arrived, landed in Damascus from Moscow, then departed again. So the update we had a couple of hours ago, that Assad landed in Damascus from Moscow because he was in Russia for the past couple of days. And then the plane left. Now they're saying he's not in Damascus. He's still in Moscow, or he was sent back to Moscow. We will keep you guys posted on that because there's a lot of fake news going around social media that where is Assad? Is he still in Moscow? Did he actually come to Damascus on that flight and then realize it's probably best to take him back to Moscow? We haven't heard anything yet. Also, the Russians are having a meltdown because Lieutenant General Sergei Kissel, who was the commander of the Russian forces in Syria, in charge of the whole Syria thing, has been fired by Putin because of the collapse of the Russian forces and the Syrian forces in the country. Now, Sergei, if I were him, I would stay away from Windows. especially if you're on the top floor. It's probably not a good idea right now to be around the windows. To be fair, from the perspective of the Russians, it makes sense to fire the guy. If this whole thing is real, if this is not some sort of plot by the Russians and the Syrians, if this is an actual, they're collapsing, Syria's collapsing, obviously Sergei has to take responsibility. His forces completely were all over the place. The Russians were there to support Assad, the dictator. And then he was just sitting there. I don't know what he was doing. So if this is a genuine thing and this is not some sort of plot by the Russians in Syria, then yeah, he should have been fired. But still, Sergei, stay away from windows for your own safety. As we said, obviously the IDF are now also getting ready to get involved directly to hit the Islamists, because they essentially, what the IDF are sending their forces to go and protect the Golan Heights. That's all they want to do, to protect their own people, because it's very close to Aleppo and that part of Syria, the northwest of Syria. It's very close. And again, the IDF just need to make sure that the Islamist rebels are not going to keep expanding, not necessarily in terms of territory, but in terms of the backlash and the mess getting close to Golan Heights. So that's why the IDF are also essentially getting ready to do that. Mario obviously posted this as well, which is quite interesting. As I said, did Turkey stage Syria's coup to solve its refugee crisis? For the record, what I said is slightly different to this. I said the general question Turkey, because they always have an agenda, but this is about a specific agenda of Turkey. This is just one angle, which is about the refugee crisis. I don't think it's just about this, but let's just read this. Turkey, home to over 3.5 million Syrian refugees, faces mounting domestic pressure to address the issue. As Syrian rebels capture Aleppo and advance towards Damascus, questions arise. Did Turkey quietly back this offensive to weaken Assad and pave the way for refugees' repatriation? With Ankara's long-standing ties to rebel factions and its military presence in northern Syria, some see this as a calculated move to reshape the conflict in its favor. Is this a solution to Turkey's refugee crisis, or a new twist in Syria's war? It might not be the actual refugee crisis thing, because I don't know, it's unlikely, but it could just simply be that you have all these so-called Syrian extremist refugees who are in Turkey. Turkey backed them against Assad, and by being there over the last few years, they would have a connection, they would have a relationship with the Turkish government. They could have meetings, they could have discussions in secret or in public, and they could just be that the extremists influence the Turkish government as well, saying, okay, let's just work together. If you help us go back to Syria and kill them, we will also leave your country, but, you know, we could get rid of Assad. It's a messed up situation, considering that overall, if you just make it black and white for a second, if you just say, you got the Western world, US, UK, France, Canada, and Israel, include Israel into that for a second. So you got one side, overall. You would think that the other side is straightforward. The other side technically should mean Russia, Syria, Hezbollah of Lebanon, the Iranian regime, China, right? You think it should be like that. No. That side is very much divided, because depending on what the situation is, Russia, Iran, China would be allies. Sometimes Russia, Iran, Syria would be allies. Sometimes Russia, Turkey, China, Iran would be allies. So in this situation, Russia and Syria and Iran are allies. Turkey, not an ally. Hezbollah of Lebanon, Iran, Syria ally. China, not a direct ally. I know it's difficult to follow. Let's just say that part is not as straightforward as you think it is. It's not really just anybody who's just anti-West will be working together. So you got the Sunnis, you got the Shias, you got the Turks, you got the Russians, and all the others. Of course, the Turks have the ambition to expand. They can't. The Russians, obviously, as an imperial force, they have been expanding in the Middle East, in Africa, Central Africa. The Chinese, at the same time. The Iranian regime only expand in the region itself. And they, you know, with the excuse of pushing the Americans out. It's funny because obviously that side, the eastern side, call the Americans on the western side imperialist, which is true. But they make it sound like only the western side are imperialist. They themselves are imperialists. They are literally expanding the whole world into the whole world. Anyway, let's get some reaction from the live chats. Super chat from Trooper saying, I don't expect the Russians will give up. But yeah. So birthing rights for the warships unless he is double dealing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you can question Assad's sanity, but not the Kremlin. Viva la Kajar says, Bamban for Prime Minister. When can we see Bamban? I'll bring him on channel soon. But the best way to see Bamban is if you go on Instagram, Maya_2C. Although I'm shadow banned, so you're going to have to keep searching, go on tags and posts. And it says, Dear Maya, stay safe. The fight in Syria is between two dark forces. Will Moscow really help his friend Assad? I think they will, but it's not two dark forces. You have some brighter forces. You do have the pro-democracy Kurds and the pro-democracy, even though the Kurds are socialists, but still pro-democracy, and the pro-democracy Syrians. You have them as well, and the Christians. They're just not as powerful. So technically, Ina's right, because it's still dominated by either the Islamist side or Assad, who is backing the other Islamists. Essentially, the fight is between the Sunni Islamists and the Shia Islamists. Even though Assad himself is not Shia, but Hezbollah, Shia, IRGC, Shia, they are backing those guys. HDS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Sunni, Al-Qaeda type, they are backed by Turkey. I know, mental. For being someone who lives in Scotland, I don't wish to get involved directly in politics, but instead try to live a stoic life. If people want to stand up against the leftist states, do it, but I am sick of my dormant mindset. How does one step back, yet not be ignorant of all of this oppression? I don't want uprisings to... It's simply, I mean, it's tough, but you have to stay informed. It's bad for mental health, but you have to, whether you're talking about domestic policies in your country, which is the UK, or geopolitics, which is also important, more than ever before, it's more important to be informed about geopolitics. It will be bad for mental health at times. It's doom and gloomy, but it's extremely important to stay informed, even if you don't directly get involved with politics. That is the reality at this point. We will be getting more updates about the situation in Damascus. It has not fallen yet. It has not been taken over. If Damascus falls, Syria is gone. At this point, Syria is falling. We have actually more updates. We have a video. I can show you a quick video. HDS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, these are the Sunni extremists, the Al-Qaeda types. They are going inside all the buildings, obviously residential areas and also governmental buildings and cultural buildings. They are bringing down both Assad symbols and also Kurds, Shia and all the others. Let's quickly go to this. This is a video I'm going to show you. They are chanting death to Shias. Curse be upon the Shia pigs. We will follow you to Karbala in Iraq. We will cut off the head of Khomeini, which, by the way, they mean Khomeini, which is the current supreme leader. I don't know why they say Khomeini, by the will of Allah. So these are the Sunnis who hate the IRGC. Doesn't mean they are good because they hate IRGC. They're both mental. They just have different issues. It goes back to the classic issue between Shia and Muslim. You think Protestant Catholics had issues? Look at these.
الشيعة يا خنازير يا خنازير الشيعة والله لن نجي على كربلاء يا خنازير والله لن نجيكم على كربلاء يا مشركين خسيتوا
حيوا ابو عبدو الله اكبر
انت لي
خان شيخون
بدك تكسر راس الخميني باذن الله
هاي كتب الشيعة
كتب الشيعة
Yeah, Shia. It keeps saying Khomeini. Khomeini died in 1980 or 1981, whatever. The current supreme leader is called Khamenei. I know for Western people, their pronunciations could sound similar. I don't blame a Canadian to mispronounce Khamenei's name, but you are supposed to be an Arab. You idiot. Get the name right. So Let's not forget, the divide between Shias and Sunnis is so historic and so passionate, even to this day, that you would think that the issue is, oh, well, they're going to come for Christians and the Jews. They have their own problems first. They're so busy killing each other like nutters, absolute nutters. There's a very good question. Jonathan says, Shia or Sunni, who are more extreme? I will give you the honest answer that most people won't. Sunnis are by default more extreme. So, okay, Sunnis are the majority. Shia are the minority. Most of them have been killed now. But Shias are primarily in Iran and then Iraq and, partly in Syria. Not anymore. ISIS killed most of them in Iraq and Syria. And the reality is, Sunnis being the majority, they also have always been the extremists, like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, blah, blah, blah. Shias see themselves as the victims, always the victims. Shias also see themselves as the real Muslims, and the Sunnis say no. It's a complicated thing. Basically, Shias believe after Muhammad, his nephew, cousin, whatever, Ali was supposed to be the next person, and then it was supposed to be a bloodline, basically. Sunnis believed in a caliphate, the Islamic State. So they're like Abu Bakr and all the others. No, we will just find the next king, basically. We're going to take over next. It became a political debate. Sunnis are more extreme. They've always been more extreme. They are the terrorists. Shias have always been just more moany, whiny. Oh, we're just so... They love their funerals. They just love to wear black all the time. They're the victims. They're like the Lib Dems of Islam. IRGC in Iran are Shia, but for the first time since 1979, they made Shias into terrorists. And, well, they also used their own government to back other Sunnis, like Hamas. Hamas are Sunni, but backed by IRGC. Hezbollah, Shia, terrorists. Shias were never supposed to be terroristy. They were always the victims. So even in their stories back in the day, centuries ago, Shia martyrs, they always were tortured by Sunnis. Oh, I died. They love martyrs. Sunnis were always strong and we're gonna kill you. Caliphate, ISIS, Taliban. So if it weren't for the Iranian regime, Shias wouldn't really have terrorists. Really, not really. Also, let's not forget the concept of suicide bombing and jumping on mines was actually invented by the Iranian regime in the Iraq War. So all this stuff that you see, suicide bombing and jumping on mines, that you see from Sunni terrorists, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, that sort of type, was actually invented by the Shias. Well, not Shias, but by the Islamic Republic of Iran, who happen to be Shias. So they invented a technique of terrorism that was then adopted by the Sunnis. Now the Sunnis are using it against the Shias. I know it might be difficult to follow, but hopefully that was to a point. I could talk about this for hours and hours. Also, we now have a confirmation that the President-elect Donald Trump has now announced Kash Patel will be, in fact, the next FBI director. Oh my God, I cannot... Is this real? Yes, he has the new nominee for FBI director. Absolutely brilliant. Donald Trump is Patel. Brilliant. Kash Patel, amazing guy, smart, loyal, genius. Is now going to be the head of FBI. The whole of the establishment in America freak out. It's time to panic. Patel obviously is against the deep state. Patel is in favor of transparency. He wants to declassify all the sensitive documents, and being the head of the FBI now would actually help the Trump administration, having the right person in charge. Of course, he has to go through the checks to make sure he becomes the FBI director, but I'm sure Patel will become the FBI director. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.